Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wolf Catholic Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Stassi, joined as always, well, at least not for the past 2 weeks, but after a small break, joined, hopefully for future podcasts as well, Father G. Father G, how's it going?
Hey, Sean, how are you?
I'm good.
How are you enjoying this warming trend we have? It's like it's 80 degrees and spring is going into summer.
Yep, that means it's time to fish for some big old bass. You see my shirt?
Okay, hey.
Let's go.
Even Jesus, what?
Even Jesus has a fishing story. He was the best fisherman and probably will remain the best fisherman for the rest of eternity. So Jesus is cool. All right.
Yeah,
Anyways,
that's competition. You should talk to Bishop Ned. Bishop Ned loves fishing,
really?
and he keeps inviting me to go fishing.
Yes, I know.
And
I know exactly
I
who you're
think I just
talking
need to
about.
go
Yeah, I
fishing.
know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I need to get with him. Anyways, to the topic today, we're going to be talking about the topic of pornography and the church's view on it, the struggles that society has with it, and the damaging effects that it can have or that it does have, and kind of how to grapple with it and deal with it in today's modern society where it's so accepting of this issue. And so I think what I'm going to start with is what the Catechism of the Catholic Church says, and then we're going to kind of branch out from there, if that's okay with you, Father.
Yeah, sounds
All
great.
right.
Sounds great.
So in section 2354 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it says pornography consists in removing real or simulated sexual acts from the intimacy of the partners in order to display them deliberately to third parties. It offends against chastity because it perverts the conjugal act, the intimate giving of spouses to each other. It does grave injury to the dignity of its participants, actors, vendors, the public, since each one becomes an object of base pleasure and illicit profit for others. It immerses all who are involved in the illusion of a fantasy world. It is a grave offense. Civil authorities should prevent their production and distribution of pornographic materials. Bam. All right, Father, what do you think?
Wow. It's good. It's good. It's good to be reminded of that. Pretty
Yep.
straightforward and pretty direct,
Yep.
right? Even to the point that it's an offense. It's offense against the common good,
Mm-hmm.
right? And therefore, the civil authority should prevent
Yep.
the production of and distribution of pornography. Now, most of our conversation here, at least there seems to be a consensus that it's a bad idea for people to sell porn to minors, right?
Correct.
And that minors and both sell porn to minors and also child pornography is especially heinous.
Yes.
Involving minors.
Yes.
And thankfully, we all agree on that.
And
right?
it's illegal. Yeah.
So it's illegal. You can go to jail. All kinds of stuff with that. But it's like magically at the age of 18, everything's okay.
The switch.
Now,
Yep.
right? Everything's okay because the general idea with morality overall, in as much as people think about it, but the cultural approach is if it doesn't harm anybody, what two consenting adults do doesn't really matter, right? And this is a separate conversation or tangent bit. You can talk about whether the law should be involved. We don't say the law should be involved in outlawing everything, right? Swearing or cursing or whatever, every kind of sin, right? So that's not the point here, but the point is pornography does cause harm.
Mm-hmm.
You just think about, we don't think about what it does to the participants, for one, right? And so much of the porn industry involves women who are trafficked, women who are, there's this Hollywood idea that it's glamorous sex workers, women who are empowering themselves and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
And not just women, men, children. In so many ways, there's a huge seamy underbelly of this plague everywhere.
Yeah.
And by consuming pornography, one is remotely participating in the production and giving value and to the demand for it, right? So there's many issues that come up, and I think I've heard the number that the porn industry is I don't know, 2 times, 10 times bigger than all of Hollywood
Ye-
combined. It's huge.
yeah.
Um, so, um, so that's the issue. But we could. There's so many aspects to this,
Mhm.
but I think the first one that comes to mind is, as you kind of alluded to, in our culture, like outside of I think religious contexts, right? Most people don't see this as an issue, right? They don't see it as an issue. It's like it's harmless. It's what people use to relieve stress. It's you know um,
Single people do.
it's fun and all of those stuff,
Yeah.
right? So what I don't know what have you heard like
Yeah.
when you grew up and like what you're like at school and like just
Yeah. It's just,
what is it people are
I mean,
encountering?
as a guy, it's just something that is part of basically puberty, right? It's like once you hit puberty, it's like, all right, if you're not watching it, then you can't be involved in, like, I don't know, the jokes whenever certain names come up. It's it's
Hmm.
very interesting. It becomes kind of like the culture of adolescence and pre-adolescence, and that carries over because you become what I, in my experience, talking with people, reading, doing studies, it carries over into adulthood, and it's an addiction, right? So it's your brain saying, I have to do
Indeed.
this, to
Hmm.
relieve whatever stress, except just like a cigarette, right? You have to do it because you have, I don't know, it's just something you've always done. And
Hmm.
it's damaging because it changes the way you look at women, it changes the way you interact in relationships, and it affects marriages. And man, it's just something that's so accepted by society, like you said, and it's really not talked about too openly. It's only talked about kind of jokingly here and there, but it's something that so many
Right.
people do, and women as well, not just guys. Women, an increasing amount of women are doing it. And the interesting thing about
Hmm.
women is they have a much higher rate of like written pornography. They read pornography more.
Right. I think women and men are attracted
Mhm.
by different kinds of things. Men tend to be more, visually oriented. Women, it's really about the story, and the fantasy that's being created and so on,
Yeah.
right? Um, but those are all general categories, and that's all very true. So,
Yeah.
um, we were looking at this article that came on the Catholic news site called Aletheia.
Mhm.
It's about 8 years old at this point. Or I can't do math, 7 years old, 2016. But in 2016, the United States Catholic bishops issued a pastoral letter on pornography. Um, and we'll have a link to this article in
Yep.
the podcast show notes, right?
Yep.
And says the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops recently issued a letter addressing the plague of pornography, titled "Create in Me a Clean Heart: A Pastoral Response to Pornography." It is an important document that the author, so Father John McCloskey, is writing this, should be read by every family and discussed in all Catholic schools and universities.
Mhm.
Um, so the Bishop's Conference makes it clear that pornography is an offense against chastity and human dignity. It is a link to other sins, has a range of victims, is pervasive, addictive, destroys marriage, and exploits both men and women. Pope Francis noted in 2014 how much pain is caused in families because of one of their members, often a young person, is enthralled to alcohol, drugs, gambling, or pornography. And increasingly, as the article continues, the challenge is, because I mean, I see it at church, I see everywhere. We have these screens that are
Yep.
everywhere, right?
Yep.
Like, it's a lot of times kids just like, you know, Sean, this, like it's a way to get the kids to be
Yep.
quiet. You put them in front of a screen, right? Now, when they're 2 or 3 years old, it's one thing. As they grow older, they start, engaging their own freedom, their own, moral agency, their own ability to choose. Um, and we're finding more and more that younger and younger children are exposed to pornography,
Mhm.
and it happens almost exclusively because of a cell phone that is a completely, limited. I mean, sorry, unlimited
Yep.
access to the internet. Um, I would go so far as to say for parents, guardians, it's like if you give your child a cell phone that has unfiltered access to the internet, it's like you're handing them a vial of poison. It's like, here, drink of it. It's as good as giving them I don't know, a line of cocaine or
Yep.
something. I mean, I'm not being extreme. It's an addiction. It's a drug. Um, and younger and younger, age 10, age 11, even younger kids, young people report being exposed to pornography. So there is the archdiocese does this thing every year. I mean, we've not been very consistent in our parish, just because it seems to creep up, and just our planning is not as good. But they have this thing called Safe Haven Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
um, where they want the priests and the whole parish to really focus on the issue of keeping children protected, using and not just about like putting a filter on your kid's phone. It's really more about the relationship that a father and mother has with their
Yes.
child, about having open communication and being able to talk to your parents about like your internet
Yep.
use, and being able to talk to your kids like, hey, what are you seeing, what are you up to, like,
Yep.
and having that transparency, which becomes difficult, I think, with adolescents. But that's the idea, that in the home, there should be a safe haven,
Yep.
right? So we see that. I hear it, of course. I hear confessions,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an epidemic,
Yep.
right? It's there all the time. It's there all the time. So I think one has to first recognize that at so many levels, and it's not just like God is offended and you are horrible evil. It's like there's so many
Mm-hmm.
dimensions to this particular sin, pornography, and then the sexual acts that often accompany it, the sins against the sixth commandment.
Right.
Um, it's it impacts, it affects people in so many
Yep.
ways. So the main thing is to, well, if you are someone who is, you use porn, you don't think you're addicted, you think it's just harmless, well, I'd encourage you to just learn more about the harmful effects of pornography, especially of long-term habit,
Yep.
and of addiction. Um, the effect it has on the ability to have relationships,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, C.S. Lewis, the Anglican apologist and writer, he had this image talking about, and he was talking about sexual fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he says, in the world of fantasy, you actually don't have to love anybody,
Mm-hmm.
because you have this whole harem of women, perfect women,
Mm-hmm.
who exist to fulfill your
Yep.
fantasies, right? So it doesn't actually cause you to grow, to cause you to do the hard work of relationship, right? Relationships are
Yep.
tough. Relationships involve getting hurt. It involves being attentive to others, it
Yep.
involves coming out of
Yep.
oneself, of repenting, of growing, all of that stuff that happens in every kind of relationship. And so if you can just have this perfect like harem of women who are available at the disposal of at your disposal at any time, you know,
Mm-hmm.
boom, there you go. There you go. Right. And so what that does, it impedes your ability to enter into relationship with women as for this tongue as a guy, right? As you grow older, because then no real woman is actually going to be matching up to that, because relationships are not just about like the body and about the sexual
Mm-hmm.
act and about sexual attributes. It's about the whole person. And falling in love and giving yourself to a whole person is a whole different category of things. There's some statistics and something that I recently heard about, which said that um, that increasing the Generation Z, they're is not very sexually
Mm-hmm.
active, right? Um, and you could say, oh, well, I mean, that's a good thing at
Yep.
one level, but it's because everyone's addicted to
Yeah.
porn.
That's it.
Everyone's addicted to porn, right? And porn is getting worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not just like, I mean, it's just more and more extreme kinds of porn, because
Yep.
again, with any addiction, as you get used to it, you need more
Yep.
extreme, higher doses
Yep.
before you're able to get the same high,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you go from soft porn to regular porn or hardcore to just all kinds of vile and filthy stuff, right? I'd never heard of the term snuff porn before, right? Like where women are actually like they simulate women being killed during sexual
Oh
encounters.
my
Like, I mean, just all kinds
gosh.
of ridiculous stuff. And our culture, Hollywood, our TV shows, like, oh, it's innocuous, it's nothing. It's all just these prudish Christians are against
Yep.
shit, like because they hate sex, and because
Yep.
they're all repressed. Um, it's a serious issue. It's a serious issue, right? So I don't know. I've said a lot there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's man, I don't know. It has to be talked about more within the families, within domestic families,
Hmm.
from to get it from the foundation, because once it manifests itself into adulthood, it's really tough to cut out. And I
Hmm.
I've know friends of mine who have gone into marriage. They've waited for marriage for sex, but they were addicted to porn, and then
Right.
they finally get to marriage, and then they get to the sexual act itself, and it didn't live up to what they fantasized, and that led to their
Right.
marriage
They're hyped. Yeah.
quickly
Hmm.
deteriorating, them cheating on their spouse. And it, like, I've seen instances of that happen, and it's really sad to see. And it just has to be talked about amongst families. Like I know I'm going to talk to my girls about it, and especially before you hand them a phone, like you said. And
Right.
parents, you should restrict, access to internet on their phones, like we do. We both the girls have tablets. That's being a parent in 2023, you have to have some
Sure.
form of
Right.
attention to give them. But we don't allow them to have access to the internet. Really, we have them on
Of
kids
course.
YouTube. That's it. They don't even get access to real YouTube. It's kids YouTube.
Hmm.
But that has to carry over into middle school, which is when that's when I was
I
first
know.
exposed to it. Was in middle. I remember in seventh grade. I remember when I was first exposed to it, and your friends have already talked about it, so it's like, oh, I guess I need to do it now because I'm that part. I'm a man now. You think when
Right.
you're in middle school, and then it starts. But it has to be. It can't be a taboo thing. Sex in general needs to not be, seen as something that shouldn't be talked about as just something you shouldn't do
Right.
because someone told you not to do it. It should be talked about
Right.
openly as a beautiful thing that's meant to be held sacred, so that this
Hmm.
idea of pornography, this artificial form of sex that's fantasizing and basically poisons your mind, uh, almost permanently for your future relationships. Um, it prevents that from even starting, and it has to be talked about. It's tough. You don't want to talk to your kids about it because it's such a, I don't know. It's gross. It's just it's it's demoralizing. It's something that's kind of just icky. And
Right. I mean, you think about it. When you're a young person, you don't really want your
no,
parents to talk
oh
to you
yeah, they're
about
not going to
sex,
want you to
right?
talk
You know, I mean,
about
it's
it.
just like,
Yeah, no, they're not going to.
right. No, but it's
Correct.
responsibility, I think, that parents have, and that, and there's all kinds of good
Yeah.
resources, Catholic Christian resources. How do you talk to your children about this, about sexuality in general, and navigating that as through adolescence,
Yep.
and again, the goal should not be, as I think a lot of times I think, it says like, well, just don't have sex, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, is like, well, I mean, we're sort of veering into a different conversation, really more about theology of the body
Yeah.
and so on. But really, it's not just no, but it's like, okay, how do you do this,
Yeah.
right? Um, and no one does it perfectly. And this is the thing that I really want to emphasize, right? We make
Yep.
mistakes, we make errors. Um, there's a beautiful image in Pope Benedict's first encyclical. It's called Deus Caritas Est, which means God is love. And early on, he's talking about erotic love,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's different kinds of love. And it says the Greeks, he talked about the Greek idea of eros
Mm-hmm.
or eros, erotic love. And basically, the idea that, the goal of human um, perfection, the human journey is realizing what erotic love is. Erotic love, you're sort of you're attracted by the other. It's the love of attraction, of desire, attracted by her beauty, and you want to go
Mm-hmm.
out to seek her and to unite her,
Right.
right? Unite the object of love, and it's a natural part of what it means to be a human. Now, it has all kinds of dimensions in our fallen state, and that's why the Greeks, always were very ambiguous about it. But it says the goal is that erotic love that goes out and seeks the beloved for myself will eventually grow and mature where becomes self-gift,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, but Eros has a role to play
Mm-hmm.
in that. That's how God set up the world. That's how he set up human love and the complementarity of man and woman finding each other. And Adam saying, bone of my bone, flesh of my
Right.
flesh. This at last is the one, right? So all of that, the Catholic approach to sexuality is not like, ew, it's evil, and only in marriage is it somehow barely tolerable because bodies are icky and sex is
Right.
horrible. It's quite the opposite. And so when it comes to adolescence and pornography and just chastity, sexuality, I think we educators, teachers in the church also have to help parents sort of like navigate that, right?
Yeah.
And but everyone has different ideas from the way they were brought up and all of that, right? So
Yeah. I was gonna say there's a really cool thing if you're in a relationship and you're struggling with pornography and you're trying to, I don't know, develop trust in your relationship. Something to hold you accountable is an app called Eagle Eye, and basically what it does
okay,
is it kind of follows you as you go on the internet, and it kind of makes sure you don't access those websites that kind of lead you to pornography, and it'll
right,
send screenshots to your loved one or your spouse, your girlfriend, etc., so that they know as well that you're doing a good job. And obviously, you have to be open about it, because if you slip up, it's not going to be something where it's like, "How I didn't know you were doing this." It's something that is known, right? So
right.
I've heard a
So
lot of
so
stories about that being beneficial.
great. Yeah, there's Covenant Eye is the one that I'm most familiar
Yep,
with,
that's
and it's very similar.
yep.
Um, and so let's talk about like how does one overcome a habit like this? And there's no one single path, but there's a lot of resources available.
Yes.
Um, and Matt Fradd, he is a fairly well-known Catholic speaker, and he's got a YouTube channel and podcast and all that. But he started out really talking about his own struggle with porn and how he
Yep.
overcame it. He's written several books about it. And there's a website that he and others are involved in called Integrity Restored.
Mhm.
And so we'll have a link to that as well, which has all kinds of resources, both understanding what porn addiction looks like, what it does to your brain, or how do you break this habit, spiritual resources, psychological resources. And the other dimension is accountability, which you alluded
Mhm.
to, right? So bringing the sin enjoys darkness, it enjoys being hidden in
Private.
shame and
Yeah.
shadow. Um, Whereas to bring it out into the light, to acknowledge one's weakness in humanity, and to with a good friend to have
Yeah.
accountability, um, and something like Covenant Eyes or other tools like that really work in the context of someone who's desiring to come out, and can be tools to have that good accountability. Um, so there's a variety of different resources out there to strive to grow, um, and to overcome and to be free. And the Lord desires to free us. He desires to free us in every area of our life, of our woundedness, of the things we've experienced, but even in the area of sexual
Yep.
sin, He desires to free us from shame and to really make us truly who we are, which are blessed in the eyes of the Father and beloved daughters and sons of the Lord. There's also some other resource, because in marriage this can be a truly uh, it can be very
Yep.
destructive, and I'm certainly aware of many situations where it has destroyed marriages as well, because it's been a hidden sin, and most of the time it's the woman who feels incredibly betrayed, and all kinds
Yeah.
of wounds that happen because of this. So the there's help, there's resources. It's not there's no cause for despair. And so, for someone who's Catholic who maybe struggles with a regular habit of pornography, definitely go to confession.
Yes.
Use that spiritual grace, but don't just stay in confession in the sense of think that God is magically going to fix
Mhm.
something, um, when there are other tools available, and He works through that, just as He does in the area of bodily health.
Mhm.
There's natural medicine and all kinds of other things that are available. So in the area of psychological and sort of the dimension of emotional and mental health, um, there's other tools available that work concurrently with the supernatural, and God works in and through all of those things.
Yep.
And so I tend to encourage people, because there's so much shame surrounding this at times as well. Is you go to confess it, no one's going to yell at you. um, there's you're going to be receiving the Lord's mercy, and
Mhm.
hopefully receiving some tools to help you overcome this. And it's great to be able to live in freedom, and not have like this slavery
Yep.
of addiction, of habit,
Yep.
drag you down. And for those of you who are in preparing in your life vocations to give yourself to the spouse or to the church in the future, it's so important to discover and to live that freedom that comes from the Lord. So,
Yep.
so just a word of encouragement to everybody that there is healing and there's freedom.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I also wanted to point out, whenever you're deciding that, you have this issue with pornography and you want to, try to get rid of it, a thing that I found that I have seen is very helpful is changing what you listen to, what you view on
mm,
social media, all these things. Because if you think about it, most of the songs that we're hearing and viewing on social media, etc., is all sexual in a way. There's some connection to a sexual desire or fantasy, especially in music. I noticed
mm,
whenever I went from not being nothing to Christian, like you have to basically train your way of thinking from a secular way of sinful thinking, which you don't really realize you have when you don't have God, to a more Christ-like, gospel-centered way of thinking. And that takes time. It takes training of your mind, just like working out a muscle. You have to slowly train your mind to want to hear things that are beneficial to your soul, as opposed to what everyone else is listening to is viewed as cool, is what's in mainstream media. And so you have to kind of pair those two. It's going to be really difficult to just quit porn and then keep listening and viewing everything else that's not porn, in
right.
your life. It's
Right. And that's part of a larger sort of, if you will, um, a way of living with one's sexuality integrated,
correct.
well integrated under the rule of right reason, and ordered. And that's what the virtue of chastity is about,
Right.
right? Chastity is not a white knuckling no to sexual desire. It's the integration of sexual
Yep.
desire so that one can freely give oneself in love. Um, just as, I mean, we recognize that when it comes to the other big strong desire that we have of life is food, right? Nutrition. Um, but for human beings, neither sex nor nutrition is always just limited to the one aspect, the biological aspect. It's so much more,
Correct.
right? Um, so like with food, we all recognize, like, there's things that you do to restrain your
Yeah.
appetites. There's a healthy diet, nutrition. You eat at certain times. You don't eat junk or try not to. And we're completely okay as a culture talking about, like, how you should eat and how you shouldn't
Right.
eat. But when it comes to sexual desire, is like, no, there's no limits. It's like whatever you
Yep.
want, whenever you want, whatever. It's
Yep.
completely illogical and irrational. But we have a beautiful vision and teaching that comes from the scriptures, from God Himself, and from the wisdom of the church that talks about how to grow in chastity. And we can maybe talk about that in a different podcast. Like, what does chastity look like for in different states of life,
Right.
right? So that could be another topic for future. Again, if there's stuff that you guys are listening, if you have questions, please reach out to us and ask us. Any comments, feedback, dissensions, leave that there as well.
Yeah.
So
And we also have a men's and women's group that invites open dialogue about any of these issues or whatever issues may
mhm.
be having, addictions. And it's a great safe place to talk about this, and also the accountability aspect. It's something you can build that trust and accountability with, alongside your fellow brothers and sisters. And so I've found that it's been really helpful in our guys group, to talk about this stuff openly, because it's not talked about much. Uh, so definitely reach out to me if you're interested in that. So, all right. Anything else, Father? Any last thoughts on this topic before we get into the question of the day?
No, I think there's so much more,
Oh,
but
yeah.
we'll put those links in. We'll put those links up so you can have some further study and reading.
Yeah, yeah. This
So
we could talk for hours about this topic. It's so much deeper. We could go into theology of the body, and that would
right,
be that would be like a Pints with Aquinas episode, 3 hours long.
right.
So, all right.
Yeah.
Question of the day.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
All right. The music. Daniel puts in the music, and then now I start talking. Okay. So, question of the day, Father G. I didn't have a question of the day. I didn't write one down. Let's see.
Mm,
Uh,
mm, mm, mm.
what is your favorite animal and why?
Oh gosh, dogs. I love dogs. Don't tell
Really?
anybody. I don't want a dog. I love
I did not
dogs.
know that.
gosh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, I absolutely love dogs. So my brother has a dog. His name is Peanut. He's a giant golden retriever. Um, and every time I visit, which isn't very often because he lives far
Yeah.
away, he remembers me. He goes
Aw.
crazy. He goes crazy wild from like when he hears me ring the doorbell from downstairs, and I come up, and he's just like, "What? Oh, I love dogs. If I could get an animal, a pet, I should say, I would get a dog. There's no way. I'm just too busy. It would be completely an act of cruelty to the animal because I'd have to neglect it because I'm always running around. But I do not like cats. Cats
Yeah.
like me. So cats, I think they pick up on the fact that people don't like cats, and then they decide to torture them. So that's just their
I think cats
personality.
just don't like anyone. Cats are just kind of mean
No,
in general.
no, they are. They are. So we're going to get lots of
Yep.
cat hate mail
I was
from
just
cat
thinking.
owners. But this is going to be a little so that's as far as pets go, but like snakes, I'm fascinated by snakes.
Wow, a priest fascinated with
Yeah.
snakes.
You're right. I know. Yeah, it's like
Interesting.
not the serpent, like not the devil. It's just they're just like they're
Yo, I
fascinating
love snakes
creatures.
too. Have you been to the Zoo of Atlanta and seen their reptile exhibit?
No, I have
Oh,
not.
Father,
I've been to the
we gotta
aquarium,
go.
but
We
no.
gotta go. It is
Okay.
amazing. I could be in that reptile exhibit for hours. It is beautiful.
All right.
So we'll hit it up sometime.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
That's it. I also love dogs. My favorite animal is a shark. Anyone at the Catholic Center will tell you that. I could talk about sharks
Yes,
for
man.
hours. So
Yeah.
I don't swim in the ocean. You guys, my advice: don't swim in the ocean. All right.
Or just don't swim.
You can swim in a pool, in the shallow end. All right, guys, we'll end it there. I hope you learned something from this. And if you guys have any more questions about this topic or interested in being in one of the groups here at the Catholic Center, please reach out to me at sean.stassi@uwgcatholic.org, or you can reach out to OLPH and ask to set up a meeting with Father if you have more questions about it from a priest perspective. But thank you guys so much for listening to episode 11. Crazy that we're on episode 11. And we'll see you guys next week. Me and Father G will be here. So y'all have a blessed day, evening, morning, whatever, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.